Hello, and welcome back. I'm an old fart, and I have a guilty pleasure, which is I like knives. I'm not an expert or an official representative of anything or anybody. I just like knives. I have a collection of small folding pocket knives, and for a couple of years, through the COVID lockdowns, you joined me as we went on a tour through the collection. I reached the end of the collection some months ago and did warn you that we're now at the point where there will be a new knife only now and then. That collection was decades in the making. But a new knife has happened, and so we're back. Thanks for joining me. We're going to have a look at this today. This is a Sandrin Dellatorre. A really interesting piece that I'll give you some background on where it came from and what's special about it. First, it has been a while, several months since I made one of these videos, and I did warn you that we were at the end of the collection and that I don't actually acquire knives that often, but you know how sometimes you pick up an old sweater and you find a $20 bill in the pocket, and what a thrill that is, because you have no idea how it got there, but it's still money. Well, this is one of those. This knife arrived about a month ago after being back ordered for so long that, frankly, I forgot that it was coming. So it was one of those found $20 bill things. Now, what's special about this knife? Well, carbide, silicon carbide. So a quick little aside here. I just said, and am going to say 2 or 3 more times, silicon carbide. It is not silicon carbide, it is tungsten carbide. And I eventually came to my senses and said the correct thing, but I didn't notice those errors until I had already finished the filming. So, silly me. Now, I've known about silicon carbide for some time. Of course, as an amateur woodworker, carbide saw blades are pretty common. It's like a step up from your ordinary steel blade, and a carbide saw blade has these angular carbide inserts on each tooth of the blade. And what I learned, this is way before I got into collecting knives, what I learned is that carbide is very hard and very sharp and lasts a long time, so it's a lot tougher and can do better in wood. I also learned that it's quite hard to sharpen. When it does dull, only diamond files will sharpen it, but I eventually did learn to do that, and I've had carbide saw blades like this one for a long time. So, and then, gradually carbide found its way into my life in other areas. So there's carbide drills. A little carbide insert on the drill tip here makes this drill last basically forever. Carbide mills, where the whole end of this end mill is a carbide insert. And so, I had come to respect carbide as a very hard, sharp substance that raised the durability of a tool. But I've only ever seen it in small wedges, like this drill bit, for example. These wedges that are on the end of the drill and welded on. This is not a carbide drill, just these little carbide angles on the end. I've only ever seen it that way. So I was fascinated when I heard that somebody was making knife blades out of carbide, and I wondered, how does that perform? It must stay sharp forever, but that's very thin, and it's a large surface area. It's not an insert. How will that work? Well, this is a knife that makes exactly that claim. They do claim on their website the longest lasting blade ever tested. I will comment that's not a very scientific claim. Okay, tested how, by who, against what else, and so on. But nevertheless, they seem to have achieved being able to make thin, large surfaces out of carbide. It is very sharp. So anyway, it sounded really interesting. So I ordered one, and it was out of stock everywhere, especially in the suppliers that I have found I can use. I ordered one, back ordered, forgot about it, and well over a year later, suddenly here it is. So let's have a walk through it. It is a really neat little piece. So formally, this is Sandrin Knives, and this is the Dellatorre model. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. It is an Italian-based company, so I'm assuming Dellatorre is a good way to say that name. They make a number of other knives. quite a few kitchen knives, actually, and a few other folders in various sizes and styles. This one is a traditional slip joint. This is a back spring, or it's a real slip joint, not a double detent ball. There's the back string poking out. Has a half stop. It does not have a nail nick. You just grab the blade with the meat of your thumb and finger. But you do get a good grip on the blade because the blade has these holes in it, so it very easily grabs and pulls. The size, it is like most of my collection, it's a mid-size knife. It's 179 millimeters long, which is, to use the accepted international standard, about 0.97 pocket calculators in length. Most of my knives are approximately that large. Compare it to a few things. It is at 179 millimeters. It's a little bit longer than a mini Griptilian, 172. It is a little longer still than a Benchmade proper at 169. Similarly shaped and sized slip joint. It turns out to be exactly the same size as a Benchmade Mini Freak. So that's the size we're talking about. And the weight, 74 grams. That's 5 grams less than the Mini Griptilian. It's the same as a couple of other smaller knives in the collection. It could be considerably lighter if the handle was something other than steel. But in any case, it's not a heavy knife, quite light, very compact. And as you can see, very thin. Let me just do a comparison here. I'll put the Mini Griptilian here beside it. Look at the difference in thickness on those knives. It's a very thin knife. And when a knife is so thin, machining tolerances become important. And as we'll get to in a minute, this one is really well done. So the blade is the thing with this knife. So let's spend a little time talking about the blade. So the blade is 3.1 inches long. I don't have that in millimeters handy, which is a problem if you're in that part of the world where 3 inches is a magic boundary. Sorry, 3-inch people. So 3.1 inches, still a very compact blade. It is a drop point blade, quite an attractive blade shape. I like drop points. And of course the magic is the material. This is not steel. This is tungsten carbide. Polyhedral tungsten carbide specifically. I am not a materials scientist, and I honestly can't expand on that anymore. They say that it is less brittle than fully ceramic blades and considerably harder than steel. It is conductive, but not very. So it's not a replacement for a ceramic blade that you might want if you were working around electricity and you wanted a non-conductive blade. It is not that. The reason you'd go with this blade, aside from the novelty factor, is that being tungsten carbide, it's very hard. It takes a wicked edge, and if you don't abuse it, it will last forever. It is a mirror-surfaced black blade. You can really see the mirroring there. I don't know whether it is colored black through some process or if that's just the natural color of this material. Don't know. The body is black steel. There is a clip. It is a deep carry clip, which is nice. I really like deep carry clips. And this is a really elegant one. Look at that shape. It's long and it's tapered in an interesting way. There we are. And there's a hole in it which is tapered in the same kind of shape and style as the taper of the clip. So I think it looks very elegant. It is slightly canted, which I like. It means that when it's in your pocket, it is not hanging vertically in your pocket, but at a slight angle, which for me anyway, matches a little more closely the natural angle of my leg and my pocket. So there is a recess hole for mounting it on this side. Now I haven't tried that, but it looks like it would not be difficult to move the clip to the other side. There is a lanyard hole here in the back spacer, so if you wanted a fob on this thing, you could do that. Let's talk about ambidextrousness, because I have some left-handed friends. Is it ambidextrous? Yes, absolutely, fully. It is a slip joint, so there's nothing magic about the opening mechanism. There is no lock, so there's nothing magic about closing. Even I was going to say I can't. Even I can open and close this thing with my left hand. As I said, the clip looks movable. Now, I have not tried it, but I would be pretty much certain that you could put the clip on the other side. So it is fully ambidextrous except for the screw heads. There's a Torex head there and not there. Again, I have not tried. Maybe you could even move the screws to the other way around so that you even had a left-handed presentation side. I don't know. But it is effectively ambidextrous. Manufactured in Italy and manufactured to very high tolerances. So a really beautiful piece. So let's go through some likes and don't likes. You've probably already got the impression that I rather like this knife, and I do. So the first thing, of course, is the cool material. I mean, what a novelty piece. Even non-knife people will find it interesting. Yeah, it's not steel, it's tungsten carbide. Right, you know. Cool. Hard, thin, very thin, by the way. Look at that. Thin, thin, thin blade. Almost disappears in my camera. Reflective, which is sort of cool. Apparently non-rusting. I don't know about the fasteners in the rest of the knife. I mean, this is obviously a good coated stainless steel. I assume decent stainless steel screws. The blade is non-rusting, so I think this is a corrosion-proof knife. I like the mechanism. It is a good, well-done slip joint. Good half-stop, good amount of tension. Not hard to open, but not going to fall open. So just a nice feeling slip joint. And unlike some older slip joints, something to really like about this one is that it is maintainable. These are not rivets, they are Torex screws, and so you can take this knife apart to clean it and so on. You know, a lot of your old grandpa's slip joints with the fake antler handles are riveted together and aren't maintainable. So I'm really pleased that this one is. Finally, not finally, but I really should comment on the fit and finish. This is a very thin blade. It is a very thin knife. And they've managed to get all of those tolerances really well. Look at that blade centering. That is a very narrow slot, and it is sitting in there perfectly centered. So just, you know, really well done machining and assembly. I like the appearance. Again, slim, not imposing. I like the appearance of that clip, slim, pointy. The big hole in it makes it sort of, I don't know, airier, less imposing. The colored anodized backspacer, I don't know what color to call that, somewhere between red and orange. Is that crimson? Anyway, it adds a little splash of color, that's nice. The mirror finished blade, and I mean, except for it being fingerprinted, which we'll come to, it is actually a mirror. You can use that blade to, you know, check if your hair is parted properly, if you still have hair. You know, speaking of the blade, of course, it's very sharp. Nice shape. I like drop point blades. And to give them some credit, it is a perfectly symmetric grind. Now, it's worth noting there are two bevels. Again, I don't know if this is something you need to do to make tungsten carbide behave, or if it was just a design decision. But there are two bevels, a large first bevel, and then a secondary bevel that brings the blade to a point. Can you see that there? Okay. They are 9 and 19 degrees, and they are perfectly symmetric. A lot of knives, Benchmade, are quite sloppy about that, you know, with the bevels being noticeably different on the two sides. Not that that matters in terms of cutting things, but it's a mark of quality and attention to detail that I like. The other cool thing about the blade, I'll just mention these holes. Now those holes are help you get a grip on the blade for purposes of opening it. Just something for the meat of your thumb to sink into. Those holes are on all of the Sandrin folders, and they are sort of their trademark style thing. If you look at the size of those holes, the diameter of those holes, there's actually a cool, historically interesting mathematical thing hidden in there. That is the Fibonacci sequence. Those two holes there, if you call the diameter of those holes 1, this one is twice as wide. This one is 3 times as wide as the first one. This one is 5 times as wide as the first one. So there's a sequence there. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5. That is something out of mathematics, an Italian mathematician named Fibonacci. discovered that that sequence of numbers, and the sequence is, each number is the sum of the previous two. So the first two, 1, 1, then 1 and 1 is 2, that one is 2 wide. 1 and 2 is 3, that one is 3 wide. 2 and 3 is 5, that one is 5 wide. And it continues, 3 and 5 is 8, 5 and 8 is 13, and this mathematician discovered that that sequence of numbers is interesting and shows up in nature all over the place, and there was quite a bit of interesting mathematical study behind that. Does that matter as a knife? No, but it's cool. Okay, and you know, as somebody who appreciates such things, it particularly attracted me. So anyway, just a cool little side bit of trivia about the blade. Now, there are a couple of things I don't like. One you've seen already is that this mirror finished blade fingerprints really badly. I guess I'm just an oily person, but I mess up this blade every time I touch it, and I find I'm just constantly getting out a cloth and polishing it, because I do think it looks nicer that way than with my greasy fingerprints all over it. Another, I'll call it a don't like. I actually can't say this for sure. I haven't tested it, but I assume that if I ever have to sharpen this thing, it's going to be hard to sharpen. But maybe it'll outlive me and I'll never need to sharpen it. Who knows? Now, the other thing is it is very thin, which is nice. That makes it a fabulous slicer. But I also need to remember this is not a pry bar. So if I try to use this, to pry open a can of paint, I will probably regret it. So a few minor dislikes. Let's reflect those likes and dislikes in my internationally unknown knife rating system. We'll start with NTGK for non-threatening gentleman's knife, and we'll do NT first. So the good news, as non-threatening, is the opening mechanism. Slip joints are just inherently non-threatening. There's no way to make it flick open that scares people into thinking you have a switchblade. It is an elegant looking knife. Nice, simple, clean lines, simple drop point, pleasant shape, smooth lines. A bad on the non-threatening is 3.1 inches. Apparently that is a magic evil boundary in some places. 3-inch knives are fine. If you have a 3.1-inch knife, you're a murderer. So that's a downside for NT, but I'm still going to rate it as an A+ as non-threatening. I think it's a beautifully done, non-threatening, elegant-looking slip joint. As a GK, gentleman's knife, the good news is of course, the exotic materials, the novel materials, gentleman's accessories, any novelty that can be a conversation piece is a real plus. The fact that it's hard to get, it took me over a year of forgetting I had ordered it to get one, so that means that I'm not going to see them in every pocket as I walk around. Gorgeous appearance. The lines, the thinness, the color, the Fibonacci numbers, which I think are really cool. And it's pocket friendly. Okay. The deep carry clip that is very slim, not heavy, slightly canted, means that it sits in a set of pants pockets very cleanly and elegantly, doesn't weigh things down. On the bad for a gentleman's knife, I can't think of anything. I think it's sort of perfect as a gentleman's knife. So with those two together, I'm going to give it an A+ as an NT GK. Now, how about the KN rating, which is what will my knife nerd friends think? Well, again, the pro is, of course, the novel material. My knife nerds will all think that's really cool. It is breaking sharp, which every knife nerd appreciates, and a very pleasant mechanism as slip joints go. Cons, well, some knife nerds don't like slip joints because you can't really fiddle and fidget with them, and you can't open this knife one-handed. Maybe there would be a way to do it by a one-handed pinch, but there really isn't any way to carry forward that motion, and I think there'd be a huge danger of cutting yourself. Don't try to open this knife one-handed. Don't send me any TikTok videos of showing that you've done it successfully. I don't care. So some knife nerds may not like those things, but I'm still going to give it an A+ because of the novelty of the material and the beautifully executed manufacturing. And finally, as a CMR, a cut myself rating. Normally I would give a knife an A if I've never cut myself. I'm going to give this one an A+, because as with many really well done slip joints. It just feels safe. I don't think I'm going to cut myself on it, despite that inhumanly sharp blade. So in summary, I've explored a few knives with non-steel blades, and this is the nicest in terms of the blade, the manufacturing, the appearance. Very cool blade. Gorgeous design. Very high fit and finish. I'm really impressed. I like it a lot. I don't know how much abuse it will take because I don't know how brittle that blade is, but I don't abuse my knives. I'm a collector, not a hunter. I'm definitely planning to add a couple of others from their line. They have, visit their website. They have several other non-ugly folding knives, and a couple of ugly ones too. I don't know what they're thinking there, but I will certainly put a couple more of these things on my wish list. And that brings us to the end. It's been a while. Thanks for coming back and for following along, and I'll see you again in many months the next time a knife happens. Bye-bye.